So in my old house in Kentucky, my dad's house that I spent a number of years trying to flee from or get out of because it was hugely toxic with all of the homeless people and drug abusers that were coming in and out. I really just wanted the hell out of there. And I actually didn't know how bad it truly was until a little bit later. But needless to say, you know, I ended up leaving that place for the one that I'm currently in, that I've been living in for the past about 2 years. Yeah, it's been 2 years now. And so, I've had a lot of time to reflect on my old place, since really being able to soak in this apartment of mine. And it's led me to think about a particular set of experiences I had with carbon monoxide poisoning, and carbon monoxide in general. But I think I should probably give some background. So, for people who live in most of the country, this is pretty unusual, but at his house, there was a gas stove and gas heating. Like, you had to pay to have this tank of gas filled. Nobody came to your house to fill it or whatever. It's like automatically through pipes. And I guess the piping system was all messed up. Frankly, we still don't even know what the cause is because he never actually got it fixed. Because to call people in to quarantine the house and to clean up the carbon monoxide and fix the gas leak would have meant to expose just how bad this house was. I mean, this house was infested with roaches, it was infested with mice, all manner of spiders and ants, and I think his assumption was, okay, if I go into this place with some professionals and they have to fix this, they're never going to let us back in because they'll see how bad it actually is. And so he ended up lying to me about how it was miraculously fixed while I was away, like trying to live somewhere else, and I ended up being manipulated into living back there again. Although it was okay in a sense because, my mom was about to get a place of her own, but then of course that fell through for a variety of reasons until, she eventually got this place. But that was a tumultuous time, right? That was a rough time because what I was getting away from wasn't like a smell. I can't smell stuff like that. What I was getting away from was a home in which my family, the people beyond just my dad, who was clearly content to be living in those conditions, my family was basically doomed to live. I had to go out and get a job of my own to get them out of there. That was sort of the assumption that I was working off of until I sort of naively believed that actually it had all been fixed, the leak was gone, and I could just go back. In retrospect, I should have asked for a lot more information, but you can't really blame somebody who's pretty young, who also had just been exposed to a gas leak for possibly multiple years. They're not exactly going to be right in the head in response to that. And so, I come back into all of this, and when I find out that the problem hadn't actually been fixed, I'm just devastated, right? Because it's not like it's possible for me to go back to where I was staying. And to be honest, I already wanted to get the hell out of where I was staying just because it was very clear that, most of the people in that building did not like me, and did not like the fact that I was there, which is okay, I don't have anything against those people, but it's interesting, right? It's interesting how, you can be so close to essentially fixing what at that point was the biggest problem in my life. The biggest problem in my life was the fact that I was breathing in this gas that could literally kill me over time. It was definitely killing brain cells. It was for everybody who was living there. We wouldn't have even known that this problem existed if not for the fact that my mom and my sister had been hospitalized with carbon monoxide poisoning multiple times. And multiple times they ended up having to go to the ER and get on oxygen. And, you know, one of the nurses there told my mom, yeah, we were looking at this, and if you came even just a little bit later, you would have died. You know, it was that bad there. And they were both sleeping out in the living room at the time, which is, I think, where the most exposure was, because you had the stove right there, and you know, the big tank is in the kitchen with the stove. Of course, I was being exposed too, but you know, I'm a young man. I don't have any like immune deficiencies or anything like that. And I think maybe my body had some kind of tolerance to it from smoking so much like I used to, but that's purely theoretical. Don't quote me on that. And I knew that I was having headaches and that I was having brain fog and that it was hard for me to think of things and that my emotions were way stronger than they had been, you know, even when I was like a teenager, you know, with the instability. I didn't know what the cause was, but it was like a roller coaster every day in a way I had never experienced before. You know, generally I'm pretty emotionally stable. I'm like one way throughout most of the day. So it was very odd. You know, the impulsivity that came with that too. You know, I've never been the most impulsive person. Thankfully, I didn't become too impulsive at that time, but it was more than I would have liked. It was more than, you know, would have been tolerable. And it led to some stupid things happening, right? Because I just was not functioning at the highest level, definitely not. And it was extremely difficult to think through any of my decisions. It was like I had this huge barrier in my mind to thinking. It felt like I just couldn't think. And I was tired as shit all the time. Like, it wasn't a good feeling, and I didn't know what it was, because my mom kept going, you know, do you smell gas? Like, I think I smell gas in here. And I literally, like, have almost no sense of smell. So, you know, I always heard that, and I was like, huh, gas? I don't smell any gas. I don't know what you're talking about. And, you know, she was the only one who could smell it. But then it happened to be both her and my sister simultaneously that experienced the first carbon monoxide poisoning, and then they had it happen again, you know. And so it was this strange saga that lasted for months and months and months. And when I actually come back after fleeing the house and being tricked and so on, you know, I sleep inside a little bit with the window open, but a lot of the time I'm just straight up sleeping outside, you know. As long as my dad doesn't have, you know, weird homeless people smoking meth out in the back or whatever, or sleeping in his car, which he would often have, you know, I would just sleep in there. Like, I just fucking lock the doors and I just sleep in the car, because at least in the car, with the ants crawling on me and everything, it's like I'm not breathing in that gas all the time, you know what I'm saying? And so I would do that a lot, where I had a hammock that my girlfriend at the time, now she's my wife, bought me, and I would just lay in that hammock and go to bed, you know, and I'd wake up, there'd be a fucking possum walking across the grass that I'd have to see, like, barely visible in front of me. I'd see it just walking slowly down there, and I'd be like, oh. I guess my camera died. So what I was saying was, I would be like, oh, I guess that's who I've been sleeping with. And by the way, you guys want to see? You guys want to see? That's you. That's like what I've been, it's what I've been talking to you on, like, for the moment, for the time being. I gotta turn this thing off while I'm talking to y'all. Okay, let me try to move this. Try to move this way. Okay, wait, hold up. Turn it off that way? Is it all the way off? Okay. Okay, now it's off. But, yeah, I fucking, what the fuck was I talking about? I was like getting somewhere in the story, and then my camera just dies on me when I feel like I'm really getting somewhere narratively important in that story. But, Oh yeah, so I had that possum just like walking across on the ground, and I've had fucking spiders crawling on me because my hammock was underneath the tree, which, you know, in retrospect probably wasn't the best idea, but um, it was what I had to do, Gutta is what gutta does, you know. And I'd come out of that slumber and I just go straight back into that house because I was like, this kind of sucks. Like, I'd gotta get the rest of my sleep. So I would sleep for the rest of it. And then it would be daytime and I would just fucking sit out up front. I would sit right out in the front of that yard. And it didn't matter, even if the tweakers were showing up, to do their rendezvous with my father, his whole menagerie, bringing their party tricks and everything. Um, I would chat them up as little as possible. I preferred to not talk to them very much, but, hold up. I actually had to let my mom into my building. But yeah, I would be chatting them up. I would try to avoid it the best I could, but I was willing to do that just in order to like have a place that I could sit that wasn't contaminated with gas, like I didn't want to be in there consuming all of that, so I would sit outside for literally the entire day. Like I would have the radio on or I would have something I was listening to on my phone and yeah, I would just fucking sit there. I would sit there out on like a little cheap Chinese made lawn chair and those foldable things, and I just fucking stare out at the road, right in front of me. And it was weirdly comfy at the time. Like it was like weirdly kind of serene in a way, just spending every day doing that exact same thing. Um, of course, I yearned for more. And so I started buying new books off of Amazon because all of my books were still in Wyoming at the YouTuber Karesu's house, who I guess isn't so much of a YouTuber anymore. But if you guys remember that arc, that was a lot of fun. Yeah, he had literally all of my books until like late last year. They were just sitting there. Um, but I have them back now. But at that time, I had almost nothing to read, so I started buying books off of Amazon, and I would read for 8, 10, 12 hours a day just out there out front, so I wouldn't have to be in the house breathing in that gas. But frankly, I didn't seem to have the more overt stuff happen with me that, some of my other family members had. I think that for me, it was more of a subtle kind of thing that I had to spend a while actually recovering from. But I also had less exposure than them because I spent so much time outside of the house, um, which is how I was able to, I think, mitigate some of the effects of it. Of course, you can never mitigate it entirely if you're getting some exposure. Even a little bit of exposure is really bad. So that was more or less the story of carbon monoxide and me. Um, and who knows really how long that was even going on for? Like, who knows how long that leak existed? Because, like, I can tell you when my mom and my sister started having problems, but that doesn't necessarily say how long the leak had been happening. That just means that it was going on long enough for them to have to go to the hospital. It could easily have been the case that, it was leaking for years or at least months and just nobody knew. And of course, nobody knew because when my dad actually bought that house, he did not get an inspector to look through it. He didn't get any competent person to check if there was, for example, asbestos in the attic, which there was, or to see if there were gas leaks or mice or any of these things. None of that stuff was ever checked. And, uh, he just walks in and is basically like, yeah, that's good. Here's $40,000. And then, of course, not of his money, of his sister's money. Um, and, and then that's where we lived, um, even though there probably should have been a little bit more research done than just that. Um, so really, who knows? Like, who knows how long that exposure was going on for? I am just glad that I have not had to deal with that in some time, uh, in a little while. Like I said, I've been living here for the last 2 years, and I am moving out soon, but not back there. I'm moving to a different location, and I, frankly, I can't wait to make videos there. But people who have been on the channel for a long time probably distinctly remember some of the features of that house because with my room in particular, I tried really hard. I tried really hard to make it look like weird and cool. And the one thing that I miss about that place is actually the way that I made my room look. Like, I feel like I had such a cool room. Maybe I'll have a really cool room like that again. I mean, this one has got style. Like, this one has got its own thing going on too. This is actually, I would say, the best room I've had so far. It just doesn't have all the posters and all the interesting stuff I had before up, but hey, what can you do? Um, don't breathe in gas. Literally, you can solve carbon monoxide poisoning with this simple trick. Number one, buy an alarm. Number two, don't live in a gas powered house. I know you Europores love buying gas from Russia, but you could do better without it. So don't live in a house that has gas because, frankly, it's bad for the environment.